Hello everyone, this is Nick Cap and I want to give you my short little 10-minute population ecology lecture. And let me start my timer here. There we go. So 10 minutes, we'll do that for 10 minutes. And so basically in population ecology, what I wanted to do is tell you a little bit about a story. And so basically in the 1860s, we human beings bought 12 pairs of European rabbits to a place like Australia that never had rabbits before. And these rabbits reproduced uncontrollably. By 1865, they had 20,000 rabbits were killed just at that one ranch. Again, these rabbits represented some meat and stuff like that. And some people probably made some money there. But what happened in the 1900s, there was over 1 million rabbits distributed all over the continents. And these rabbits were kind of eating everything. And so here's a fence that they had here. They didn't want the rabbits to get into a certain part of Australia, so they put in this fence. And we can see these rabbits just kind of running over here, just wanting to get rid of to go into there. These rabbits were destroying farmland. They were promoting soil erosion through their digging, made grazing treacherous for cattle and sheep who would kind of fall into those holes, and they competed directly with the native organisms that were there. So the Europeans, being smart, said, hey, let's just bring in the European red fox to kind of eat the rabbits, because that's what they normally do in Europe. However, the European red fox didn't want to do the rabbits because those were hard to eat, and the native birds and small mammals had never seen the red fox before, so they weren't shy of the red fox, and so they had eaten in there, and so they had little impact on the population. Today, the rabbits and foxes and other non-native plant species are still an endangerment to Australia. Again, this is a story that's kind of gone out, so people are really, really hesitant, are really fearful of introducing any other species. Today, we'll talk about population ecology, which is a study of factors that affect population density, and we're looking at density and growth. A population is a group of individuals of single species that occupy the same general area. Population ecology is used to study how we have sustainable fisheries, control pathogen. We'll also kind of look a little bit at kind of our human growth. And so population ecology can be biotechnology in that our understanding of our populations will help us to kind of control and manage these populations, especially populations that we use. In order to do this, we need to look at these things that we call survivorship curves, which graphically represent the data. And here are survivorship curves that we have. And so things like the oyster, we have organisms that produce lots of offspring. These offspring die relatively young and they're harvested, but we have some individuals who live to an old age who are able to produce this. These populations are able to grow very quickly. Second population that we look at are we human beings. We human beings tend to have relatively large offspring, and what happens is that we produce relatively few of these offspring, but the likelihood of those offspring surviving until old age is much greater. And then we have a middle of this, which is basically organisms that are able to basically, once they're born, throughout their lifetime, they have an equal chance of death throughout their lifetime. This looks kind of interesting. And so what we have are two types of kind of life histories, what we call an opportunistic life history and a logarithmic life history. Opportunists take immediate advantage of these favorable conditions and can increase their population immensely. These typically have a type 3 survivalship curves. The equilibrial life history is where you reach maturity slowly. They produce few well-cared-for offspring. They're typically large body and longer lived. They typically exhibit a type 1 survivorship curve. And so here's a chart that we would look at to kind of compare them. And so climate, unpredictable climates favor these kind of opportunistic populations that can grow up real quick. When things are relatively stable, then you're going to have these kind of larger populations, right? Because again, if you have individuals, if there's floods and famine and all this kind of things like that happen, then your stable population is going to flunk out. So we'll look at it like this. Again, one of the things that we look at in there is timing reproduction. If you are an opportunistic, you're going to come out and you're going to get pregnant right away. If you're equilibrial, you're going to wait till a little bit later on in life in order to have offspring. And prenatal care, parental care, you're going to have little care in these opportunists. Again, the parents are, once they have you, they're working on getting the next set of children. Again, in equilibrial populations, we tend to have a lot of kind of prenatal care. And so an example of an opportunistic organism would be something like the dandelion here. And an example of an equilibrial organism would be something like the elephant. You're not going to have tons of elephants growing. An exponential growth curve is kind of really interesting because all organisms will basically grow like this. Even human beings that we see, or even elephants, will as well. And basically, what you have is in a perfect environment where you have kind of basically no death. You'll have two organisms producing their replacements, they're still there, and so on and so on and so on, until you get this kind of exponential growth. And so that's one of the reasons why 12 rabbits can become more than 20,000 rabbits in a relatively few seasons, because each of those rabbits would have a bunch of offspring. And we got to have these pictures of these nice cute rabbits here, but they are death. Exponential growth explains how a few dozen rabbits can become millions. In certain circumstances following disasters, organisms that have opportunistic life histories can recolonize an habitat and basically get something in there relatively quick. Again, we'd be up to our eyeballs if we didn't have something that was kind of limiting our growth. And in reality, what we have are these limiting factors. These are environmental factors that hold a population's growth in check. They restrict the number of individuals that occupy a habitat. We have what's called carrying capacity, which is the maximum population size that a particular environment can sustain. Logistic growth populations occurs when growth rate decreases, the population approaches their carrying capacity. And so what you see when we look at logarithmic growth, so these are fur seals. And what we see is once you reach the carrying capacity, your growth rate is going to stop. That's those logistic animals. And so again here, relatively large animals that are taken care of at birth. And so the carrying capacity for a population can vary depending on the species and the resources available to them. And so again, when we look at it, how rabbits grow is they're going to exponential growth. They're going to greatly exceed the carrying capacity. Whereas this logistic growth, there are some kind of factors that limit the growth of these kind of individuals. And so regulation of population growth that we see inside of there. Oh, that's my 10 minutes that I have. What we're going to look at is density independent and density dependent factors. Density dependent factors are kind of these self-regulators that we have. Again, when we look at the control of populations, we see that these density independent factors and density dependent factors both care for those. Population cycles are basically what we can see is here's the rabbit and the lynx. When the rabbit population goes, the lynx population grows right after. But when the rabbit population crashes due to the increase in lynx, we have it there. And then again, we have this area that's going. And so what we want to try and do is this coordinated. So what we can do with population ecology is we can use it to kind of. So we have this thing called sustainable resource management, which is again accounting for logistic growth. And then I'm going to skip over the starlings. And so what we have is this thing that we call integrated pest management, which is where agricultural operations create their own highly managed ecosystems. Again, these are genetically individuals that are growing. They're planted closely together. And again, our crops are a banquet for planting animals, pathogenic bacteria, and viruses. How do we kind of keep them going? And so again, here's an example of some of the things that can kind of balloon up and grow. Pesticides aren't necessarily the best thing because they result in pesticide-resistant pests. They can sometimes kill the pest, but also they're natural predators as well, and they also can kill predators. In integrated pest management, what we look at is that we can tolerate low levels of pests in a population. Okay, as long as we can control these pests, we use sustainable control of agricultural pests. We use a combination of biological methods, chemical methods, and actually cultural methods as well. What do we do that are promoting these guys to go? We use pest-resistant variety of crops. These crops we can produce using biotechnology. We use mixed species planting. This is more the cultural. So again, instead of producing whole miles and miles of a particular crop, we would grow it in smaller patches, because again, these bugs have a hard time moving from one area to another, and again, we rotate our crops. I'm not going to get into population growth, but basically we look at our populations as our combination of nutrition, sanitation, and healthcare can increase the population of our growth. What we're looking at our populations, we're seeing that our population growth rate is actually going down. So our population may be going down. And basically what we have in our first world countries, this is an example of basically a kind of a third world country where you have a very big population of reproducing organisms. well, we're human beings, that as we get a little bit older, this kind of flattens out. And we tend to see that. We can also look at our ecological footprint, which is looking at our food, fuel, water, housing, and waste disposal, and then look at all the things that we in our first world country have and things that we would have in India. All right, so thank you very much. Bye now.